Hi guys, welcome back to Dimitra's Dishes. So today I'm going to teach you how to make a very elegant hazelnut sponge cake. Very easy to make. You're going to want to save it because next week we're going to make a beautiful dessert out of this. We're going to go over the ingredients and then we're going to get started. So of course you're going to need some whole toasted hazelnuts, a few breadcrumbs. I have panko breadcrumbs here. Sugar, I have it separated because you're going to see why in a little while. We have some cornstarch, salt, all-purpose flour, and I have some eggs separated here. There's 6 large eggs. I have the whites in one container and then the yolks in another. So one thing about the hazelnuts, I know that in some places they're really hard to find, and when something is hard to find, it also gets very expensive. You can definitely substitute toasted almonds for this, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, I'm going to I already toasted them. So basically what you want to do is put them in the oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for a few minutes, maybe 7 to 8 minutes until they get really nice and aromatic. And then you want to put them in between a clean dish towel and sort of rub them together to get some of the skins off. It doesn't have to be all of them, doesn't have to be perfect. But anyway, so we're using hazelnuts today. And I'm just going to puree these with the breadcrumbs, and the breadcrumbs are going to help the hazelnuts stay separate, kind of, so that way when they're ground up they don't turn into like a hazelnut puree. And I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. We're making like a hazelnut flour. I like to keep it a little bit on the chunky side where you can taste the hazelnut in the cake. It's completely up to you if you want to pulse this until it's more finely ground. You're the boss of your hazelnut cake. So I'll show you what I like for mine to look like, and then you can do whatever you like with yours. Alright, so this is what I like for the consistency and texture of my hazelnuts to look like. I have some bigger pieces, some finely ground pieces. You get where I'm going with this. So I'm going to use my stand mixer because we're going to whip up the egg whites until they're really stiff and fluffy. It's going to look kind of like a beautiful marshmallow cloud. And it happens much faster in a stand mixer attached with a whisk attachment. If you have one, you're going to want to use it for this recipe. If you don't, you could do this with a hand mixer as well. It's just going to take a little bit longer. So now you want to make sure when you separate your eggs that the egg whites are completely free of even a little drip or a little dot of the egg yolk, because if there's any fat in it, they won't whip up. So that's important. If you're a beginner at baking cakes and separating eggs, a good thing to do is to separate your eggs. Your yolks don't really matter, but your whites, do them in a little bowl separate from the one that the rest of the egg whites are in, because if you were to happen to drop an egg yolk in here, most likely you're going to have to waste all of this or save it for breakfast, for an omelet, and start all over, and that just takes extra time. So crack them in a separate little container or bowl or whatever, and then put them in your mixer. So I'm going to start whisking these egg whites, and then I'm going to slowly add half a cup of granulated sugar in here. Alright, so after just a few minutes of whipping this on super high speed, you're going to get a beautiful cloudy looking, marshmallow looking egg white mixture, and that's a meringue, and that's what we're going to be looking for. The reason I started with the egg whites first is so that way I can use the same mixer and I don't have to wash it. If I were to whip up my egg yolks first, then I would have to wash it and do more work, and I don't like to do more work. So anyway, so I'm just going to transfer my egg whites into this big large bowl here, and then I'm just going to whip up my egg yolks with the sugar, and then we're going to move on to the next step. So once the egg yolks and the sugar beat and they form really nice ribbons coming off the beater like this, you know they're ready. They're also going to be really nice and thick and pale yellow. I'm just going to set that aside, and the last thing to do is I'm going to combine my ground up hazelnuts with the cornstarch, the flour, and the salt, and just give it a nice mix. And now we're just going to put everything all together. So first thing we need to do is to lighten up our egg yolk mixture. I'm just going to take about a quarter or so of the egg whites and just fold them in. And you could use the same whisk that you whip them up with and just fold everything in like this and mix it in all together. And then I'm just going to add this lightened up egg yolk mixture to my egg whites, and I'm just going to fold it in while I'm going to add a little bit at a time, maybe like a quarter cup at a time of my nut mixture, and then I'm going to fold it, just making sure that the air doesn't get knocked out of it, because you want this to be really nice and fluffy. And if you over mix it, the egg whites will flatten out, and you don't want that. So we're just going to begin by from the bottom up. Just like this. I'll add some of my nut mixture. And I'm going to keep doing this, folding in and adding the nuts until everything is well combined. So once it's all combined, it's going to look just like this. And now you just want to transfer it onto a baking sheet that's lined with parchment paper. All I did was rub the bottom, brush the bottom with some oil or butter, whatever you have. You can even use cooking spray, non-stick cooking spray, and then just put a piece of parchment paper on top of that. And then we're just going to pour all of this beautiful, luscious cake batter into the pan, and I'm just going to spread it out. Okay, so my oven is preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to pop this in the center rack of the oven, and then I'm going to let it bake for between 15 to 18 minutes or until it's beautifully golden all around. Once it comes out, you just want to take a knife and go all around the sides to release the cake from the pan, and then allow it to cool completely, and then we're going to move on to the next step. My hazelnut sponge cake is ready. It took exactly 15 minutes in the oven at 325 degrees, and it's supposed to look really beautiful and golden like that on top. Sometimes it depends on the oven. It has taken up to 18 minutes, so just keep an eye on it. You want it to be really nice and golden, and then let it cool completely in the pan before you take it out. Now, since I'm not going to make the cake, the dessert that I'm going to show you how to make next week, I'm not making it right now. I'm going to store this in my freezer, so this can stay fresh in the freezer for about 2 weeks or so. I don't think it'll last that long in my house because this tastes delicious with tea. It's really nice and light. But let me show you if you are going to save it, which you should, because next week I'm going to teach you how to make delicious nut meringue layer cake. It's going to be out of this world, yummy, elegant, beautiful, everything you want in a dessert. Now, you just want to take some powdered sugar, some places it's known as confectioner sugar, and just sprinkle the top of a piece of parchment paper. And then you're just going to take this out because the top is really, really sticky. Just like so. It can stay just like that. And then just peel off the parchment that's behind it. Just like that. There's a little piece right there with my name all over it. If it does crack or separate or break, don't worry about it. Don't panic. Don't do any of that, because when it gets put all together into a cake form, you'll never know that happened. Now, you can serve this as is, of course. You can cut it into squares and put some delicious homemade whipped cream on top and drizzle it with some melted dark chocolate or some ganache. You can do so many things with it. Honestly, I like to have this with a cup of tea if I'm not making like a special dessert out of it, with some apricot jam. You can do raspberry jam, strawberry, whatever you want. The good thing about this cake is that hazelnut goes well and pairs well with so many things, especially chocolate, but it goes really well with apricot jam too. It's really nice, sticky, but it's super duper light because there's no butter in it or oil or anything like that. Let me taste it. It really tastes, you can taste the hazelnut throughout the cake. I love that I left some of my hazelnuts really nice and coarse because I like the crunch that it gives it. I'm going to wrap this up in plastic and keep it in my freezer. You want to wrap it really well, maybe 2 or 3 times, so that way it stays airtight so it doesn't absorb any smells from your freezer. And come back and see me here next week where I'm going to teach you how to make a delicious dessert with this. To get this recipe with the exact measurements, as always, go to my website www.dimitrasdishes.com, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye everyone.